Good afternoon, everyone, and excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular afternoon council meeting of Monday, April the 11th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. 1, you can attend council chambers in person. If you wish to do so, please register in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in council chambers. 2, watch the meeting live or recorded, as mentioned, on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. 3, you can register in advance to speak during the meeting. If you wish to comment during the public comment opportunities under items 6 and 9, you are asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and how you will be participating, whether in person, telephone, or Zoom. Further details will be provided to you when you register. And finally, you can request to speak during the meeting. If you have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, there will be an opportunity will be given, time permitting. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate officer, any late items to introduce? No? Okay. So could I ask for approval of the agenda? Council, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the minutes, March 28th, 2022, the Committee of the Whole, and the regular afternoon meeting. Again, Councillor Holmes and Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Great. No delegations today. Anyone waiting to speak? Nope. Okay. So we'll go right on to the first of several business items, 7.1, the Eco Village Concept Plan at 13500 Prairie Valley Road. And CAO, were you introducing this? No. Okay, so straight to Brad then, our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wait till the slides get on the screen here. Maybe I'll just start talking while the slides start coming on the screen. So I'm very happy to be here today. Along with our consultants, I'll introduce as well to council. We have Edward Porter, Principal and Senior Designer from Modus Planning and Design on the call, joining us via Zoom. And then also, I believe Jessica Mann is also participating via Zoom. She is an urban designer with Modus Planning and Design, and I'm very happy to be here with them today to present the draft Eco Village Concept Plan for Council's review. This has been a 6-month design and technical study process to come up with this draft plan with significant expertise that the district has utilized in the fields of architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, geotechnical and civil engineering, as well as biology and ecology to deliver this draft plan for council's consideration. As well, we've had significant stakeholder engagement that has occurred in the development of this draft plan, which we'll get into today with our presentation. And our consultants as well will present some initial public feedback we have had from the draft plan being going out to the public. We had a survey and we had some survey results. So Edward will be providing a presentation and overview of that feedback and what changes were made to the draft plan following that public feedback. I'll just wait for the second slide here to get them on the. There, oh, wrong presentation. There we go. Okay, so next slide here. So if council remembers, this project was introduced in August and included as a new strategic priority project for councils, including with all of our other strategic priority projects that the district is working on right now. And under the pillar of community resiliency, it's listed there, it's highlighted in yellow. And I just want to point out that although the project is placed under the community resiliency pillar, I think it could have fit in a lot of different areas in terms of the strategic priorities of council, including infrastructure investment with the development of potential new roads and access into Cartwright Mountain to access the trails within Cartwright Mountain, the extension of sewer servicing potential from this project as another form of infrastructure investment. The other pillars as well, active lifestyles. I think that the project could intertwine well with active lifestyles and to be able for people to actually live in close proximity to the Cartwright Mountain Trail system. And then as well as alternative energy, of course, with the potential connection and integration with the district's solar and storage battery project. So there are some pillars that are potentially being achieved with this one project idea. Next slide, please. The district's property, again, as background, what property we're talking about is, it's got a few addresses, 13500 Prairie Valley Road, as well as 12591 Morrow Avenue. It's currently zoned administrative institutional, and it's shown here in this teal color on the map. It is currently within the urban growth boundary. I'll get into that discussion a bit with council before passing it on to Modus. But there is some existing residential that surrounds the property, with Deer Ridge being to the northwest, Sunset Place cul-de-sac. There's an active development with Cartwright Mountain with Brown to the north, as well as the existing downtown residential as you go further to the east. Next slide, please. Thanks. So in total, that we own about 66 acres of land in this area. It's shown there in that aerial overview. It's primarily the very toe of Cartwright Mountain, and there is some roads, road dedication right-of-ways that are transecting the property, which will be some of the next steps we get into as to how to deal with those. Next slide. So council background with regards to this project, it originally was stemmed from a notice of motion at the March 8th, 2021 meeting. Was the idea of exploring a eco-village styled residential development in the vicinity of the solar and storage project. And then following that notice of motion, we came back and presented a feasibility analysis in August 9th of 2021. Again, that's when we added it as a strategic pillar to council's strategic priorities. And as well, we received council approval as well for a budget amendment to complete a conceptual plan for the Eco-Village project. And that's why we are here before you today to present this concept plan that's now been achieved by our consultants and district staff. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the property is located within the district's urban growth boundary. It's highlighted there in blue and gray. This urban growth boundary is the boundary where we want to direct any of the district's future growth and urban growth specifically with regards to where we want that growth to occur within the district of Summerland. If council remembers, the official community plan was amended in 2018, and they're following an urban growth study review that actually looked at where we want future growth areas to be developed within the district. And some areas were actually excluded from our urban growth boundary, including Crescent Beach was excluded, as well as North Prairie Valley, which previously was included. So there was a contraction of the urban growth boundary at that point in time. But these areas, as well as Deer Ridge and maybe further on to Deer Ridge, remained within the urban growth boundary as the area we want future growth to occur, given its proximity to potential sewer service and connection, as well as the residential development that's already existing in Deer Ridge being a factor, and also because we did not want to infringe on any agricultural lands, that all of these lands were excluded from the agricultural land reserve. Next slide. Another strategic priority project that was actually identified prior to the Eco Village was the extension of sanitary sewer servicing to the Deer Ridge area. In this regard, the district has completed a 90% engineering design for extension of sewer to Deer Ridge, which transects the district's property, shown in that green extension there, and through the potential Eco Village site. So definitely there could be some benefit if the district was to proceed with the Eco Village project of either continuing that extension to Deer Ridge, but also making it more realistic that the sewer project can proceed from a financial perspective. Next slide. Just some other characteristics. I previously presented this slide to council before in August, as well as a previous council, the whole meeting. Some sustainability characteristics of the property that lend well to an Eco Village type project. Obviously, we have the solar and storage battery project happening. It is moving forward this year. It has been revised in terms of its scale, but it's still expected to power approximately 60 average homes per year from that solar and storage project. There is a potential for a microgrid connection, perhaps down the road with the Eco Village project. With a microgrid, there could be a target of carbon neutrality type of development, including Step 5 of the BC Energy Step Code to reduce the carbon impact of the Eco Village development. Council's already aware, and staff is going to be presenting that there is a significant amount of highly sensitive habitat on the property, which we do want to protect, and the draft plan that has been prepared is cognizant of that. I've already mentioned the extension of community sanitary sewer, which will improve some of the environmental concerns we're having in the Deer Ridge area right now with septic systems leaching into the groundwater in that area. And then it's not that far away from the downtown core, with a 2-kilometer walk and cycle to the downtown. And already mentioned phenomenal access to recreational trails and park access via the Cartwright Mountain Trail System. And then finally, just the solar project boundary itself can be considered a brownfield site redevelopment because it is a former public works yard that has some contamination stuff. Go ahead. Next slide. So the concept plan background itself. So following that budget approval in August, we created an invitational request for proposals in September. We reached out to different consulting firms that could help us with this project. And ultimately, the concept plan was awarded to Modus Planning and Design in August of 2021. The first order of business was to initiate the technical assessments that were required for the concept plan itself, and those have been prepared by subconsultants of Modus, including an environmental impact assessment for the project that was completed by Associated Environmental, cultural and heritage assessment of the values that are inherent to the site, which was actually completed by Penticton Indian Band themselves. They have a natural resources department there that provided that assessment. And then finally, as well, we also completed a geotechnical assessment to ensure that what was being proposed for the Eco Village plan was going to make sense from a geotechnical perspective. Next slide. And then also included in the concept plan was a series of different public engagement opportunities, which Modus will provide greater detail on. But I want to point out that we have had some extensive input here through the design charrette process, so starting off in November 29th and 30th of 2021. We had key stakeholder groups invited to the design charrette, including adjacent landowners and recreational trail groups that access the Cartwright Mountain Trail System. We've had also professional expertise on hand as part of the design charrette. We had sub-consultants in architecture, landscape architecture, illustration, and civil engineering all in the room in that 2-day session. And if council remembers as well, we had a direct meeting with council through a council of the whole meeting the afternoon of November 29th to get some feedback directly from council on this project. Following that design charrette, we had individual stakeholder meetings. We had a presentation in February, this past February, with Penticton Indian Band and their major projects committee. They definitely see some shared value in this project. And then following that, we went to the public and we shared the draft concept plan via the district's website. And we've collected feedback from March 9th to March 28th. And Modus is now able to present the results of that feedback that we collected. And with that, I'm happy to pass on the reins to Edward Porter from Modus Planning and Design to lead us through the concept plan, the elements of the concept plan itself, as well as that public engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for hosting us again today. I think, well, first of all, everyone can hear that, and I want to make sure that I can share my screen. So let's see if that works. Did that work?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. So you should see the just the title slide there. So yeah, it's great to be back. And thanks, Brad, for the context there. Really helpful to see sort of the planning context as well as the process context, and the reminder of our last chance to connect, which was that committee of the whole in November. Seems like a forever ago. I'm sure for the rest of you as well. But good to go back and look at those notes and recall the chance that we had together to actually meet some of the project team and talk about some of these aspirations. The reason I think that if I can advance my slide here, I'm going to jump right in because I'm going to try and keep this to about 15 minutes and make sure we have plenty of time for discussion. But wanted to frame a little bit of the start of the presentation with this fundamental question that we've been asking ourselves, and we were really kind of thinking with you that day in November around what is an eco village and how we define that, and what are the sort of fundamental pieces of this that we're struggling with. So we have a simple definition here that talks about a community whose inhabitants seek to live in a way that has minimal impact on the environment. We further break down that idea, that word, into the sort of eco component and the village component. The ecological part of that, the connection to its place, the sensitivity on the land. We have a few different strategies that permeate the concept. One, I'm really only going to speak to two right now. One is around minimizing impact, that sort of classic avoidance approach. So where we're recognizing these are sensitive lands in terms of their site, their habitat value of surrounding sites, their terrain complexity, we'll get into that, but there's sensitivities that we need to manage. So really the intent was, how do we focus development and the footprint of development in areas that are avoiding areas of greatest sensitivity? How do we develop in areas that are most appropriate for development given this context? So that's one big piece. The other piece is then, when we think about development, what are the ways that we can guide development and require it be built in a certain way on the land in order to, again, achieve these more environmentally sensitive approaches to land development. So in that spirit, what this concept plan is fundamentally is a way of taking those ideas and the vision as it's emerged through this process and creating a bit of a structured document that will support further refinement of an ultimate design. So that's the idea of the ecological side. Then there was this idea of a village, and what is a village and why is this different, or what makes it different than just development generally. And so that was something else that you'll see in this concept. And that's really the only other part that I wanted to emphasize here in the intro, is what makes a village different is that it very deliberately is organized around ways of gathering and a mix of uses. So it's not simply a residential subdivision or a place for people to simply call home, that there's added layers of thinking and planning to that around deliberate places to gather, have social connection, and potentially, ideally, have some mix of use to support sort of a smaller environmental footprint generally, where you have some service provided there as well. So in light of that, we had a series of values that we wanted to articulate upfront, starting at the top, working with nations, with the PIB and integrating Indigenous perspectives in the planning, integrating landscape sensitivity and natural asset management into the planning approach. The idea that we wanted to focus on ground orientation, meaning resolving the scale of built form to much more of a friendly face, front doors and ways of activating streets and spaces, family friendliness and inclusivity. Critical to this is the idea of planning for low carbon future and a more resilient future, and that's clearly the case in integrating this with the solar project next door. Fundamental as well is the opportunity to site this development in a way that enhances the recreational and active transportation opportunities on site. Again, plugging into this trail network of Cartwright Mountain and enhancing that, connecting it further. And then finally, holding some space, and that's what this rendering gets into, and we'll see it more through the concept presentation, this idea around a community hub. What is that way of bringing people together and activating that central space that makes this more than sort of another residential subdivision? So with those in mind, I'll run us through a little, I'm going to try and be really quick here, and we can come back if we have questions. Our process around observation on the land, aspiration in terms of the visioning, and then exploring the concept options that we've come to today. As a real high level start, on the left-hand side, you see some analysis layers around slope constraints, around elevational relationships, and around aspect and the way the sun hits the land and creates those cooler or warmer areas. So thinking about that, and as well as just the landform itself and the way that the contours represent landform and complexity, we identified some of these rooms, we typically will call them, where certain types of development site better than others, where you might want to think about opportunities for views or internal spaces and quiet spaces. But that's just a little bit of the background around land analysis. In addition to that, we were thinking on the design side and the design vision side. Sorry, I jumped forward there. Really, what are some of these ideas around ecological design or environmental design that we would want to see incorporated within this plan? So that idea of a hub structure, ways that we can animate a social gathering space, how we might start to look at smaller pocket neighborhoods or clusters of smaller individual buildings and shared space. Obviously bringing low impact development guidelines to bear in all of the concept planning and sort of frameworks that we would attach to that. Thinking about building siting, again, in light of the complexity and kind of unique features of this nose of land, how we actually place development program on the land to take advantage of that. That ties into specifically how we think about architectural and landscape design expression, where we might think about ways that buildings can take advantage of that indoor-outdoor relationship, where we can start to think about how landscape design utilizes a native planting palette towards, again, reducing impacts to the landscape. And finally, as another way of thinking about that, weather protection and recognizing that this is a a place that's very hot in the summer, very cold in the winter. How do we utilize our development program to create those extensions of comfortable space for people who are living there? So now I'd like to present the concept at a high level. I'll present it in sort of 2 pages. This first slide really looks at uses and how we might start to think about a collection of uses. Then I'll speak a little bit more to the actual building location and sort of sense of place or program, and we have some renderings as well. Here I'd just like to give us the context of the ESA 1, so those highest sensitivity environmental lands around the site that you see proposed within a large nature park dedication, taking up about 1/3 of the area in that 20 acres in the hatched lands. And you can see the trail networks working sort of from the center of the site plan out into that nature park. There are also some existing features including the existing wetland that's mapped on the north side of the project area in that kind of hollow, that lowland area. And then working south from that, we see a mix of cottage forms in that idea of smaller cottage homes clustered around those neighborhood parks and gathering spaces. We then see opportunities around this central hub area, and we really kind of highlight that with the asterisk. We'll get into some of the program ideas, but we see the potential to concentrate really the more intensive development footprint, including the solar program and the solar farm around that hub. There's the existing pump track, if you're familiar with the site, and the access in. Really, we're imagining limiting the sort of typical public road access into that site as a way then to tie off onto these smaller strata streets that might maintain and connect the other development sites. But really then we're seeing a mix of more dense forms in terms of the condo program that's shown here. In these larger sites in a multi-unit format, and then opportunities where we see some other hillside areas and more sensitive siting of residential program to look at townhouses. And those are really the 3 sort of forms of residential that we've held within the concept plan. We understand that there's a large desire to access this site as a point of departure or a trailhead for Cartwright Mountain and that trail network. So we do include not only in that community hub idea, but a bit of a park access point and parking along that area, as well as sort of imagining a street cross section that's designed to accommodate parking to the side of the street, again, to avoid large surface parking and the environmental impacts that go along with that sort of configuration. I'll transition now then to some of these places and programs, and really I'll begin in the extension of the roadway into the site. We're imagining a series of those townhomes along the ridge line to the south side of the project, and those we understand we're just calling those the hillside and solar residences. I'll show you a bit of a cross section to understand how those work with the hillside terrain. Again, I mentioned this. The valley bottom there, we were calling those the neighborhood clusters. So those are smaller cottage clusters. And again, I'll show you a rendering of those, but understanding that as a more quiet kind of contained interior space, we wanted to explore a different housing program and development format within that sensitive land, within that sort of interior quieter space that's different from once you get out onto the sort of ridge line towards the nose of the property. When we look at E, we identified the parkside residences, and that's really taking advantage of the service road that will access the solar farm, and utilizing the lands that are available to that are already disturbed today to hold additional residential density on the site. You see then F is shown as that solar farm and the program there as the center of the site. And then G is that community hub and this idea of a flexible space to accommodate that community gathering and kind of evolution of that program. We have then the entire sort of eastern edge of that nose and tying into the nature park is more of the ridgeline park and really trying to utilize that adjacent to and away from some of those more sensitive areas, but also where we can appreciate most people will want to go, managing recreational access to that ridge line and the views that come with it. So we see that as more of a community park and you know overlooks and kiosk kind of trailhead program to go along with that to accommodate more foot traffic. And I already mentioned the sort of wetland habitat and the nature park that surrounds the site. So to share a little bit of what that vision, what that exploration considered, here we have the entry as we're entering the site and that idea of the uphill and downhill townhouses, maintaining a nice friendly relationship to the street and taking advantage of those hillside conditions. This sketch shows the idea of those neighborhood clusters and the way that we might explore some of these smaller detached cottage forms where we might have the potential for shared parking and shared recreational space or community garden space that's framed by a cluster of small lot detached cottage program. And then finally, zooming back out to that center, you know, this was the idea of this neighborhood hub or the community hub. So we signaled the existing pump track and the ability to hold some community space, the sort of turnaround destination point, the opportunity for that to be a bit of the trailhead access as well, and trailhead coming into this community hub. Whether or not that's a space for artistic interpretation, seasonal programming and gathering, or whether or not you might even start to find some element of a structure or a pavilion that could be used by different groups is kind of a question that we had around how do you accommodate that space now so that we know that it could grow as the community needs might grow with it. So really, you know, those are the bones of the concept as we've developed it to date. We did look, so I walked you through this concept on the left-hand side that looked at the potential to hold those higher density condo forms within that structure and relationship of uses. We also talked about, well, you know, if we're not interested in putting that extent of residential density on site, we can also explore a medium density version of that where those same sites are simply utilized within a townhouse format. The tension between those two, of course, with the greater density comes you know, a greater volume of use, but it also starts to afford a wider range of housing diversity and with that attainability or even affordability. So depending on how that works and what those priorities are, you know, we understand the role that density can play again within this controlled footprint and within a framework of environmentally sensitive design guidelines. So that's something to consider. So I wanted to transition now and quickly speak to some of the responses that we heard from the survey. The concept plan and far more in-depth description and discussion in that report were posted online. And for the better part of you know, nearly 3 weeks, that survey was up online and available to the public. We had 118 responses. And I'm just going to summarize that. We had a real distribution of response. I think it was very interesting, and I'm going to generally discuss support levels of support for the values themselves, the Eco Village, the Community Hub program, the neighborhood park, the nature park, and its location, and even the fact that it was a part of the project and the program that we're proposing, and then overall just the concept plan itself. So in terms of the distribution of responses, we had a real range, and that's where you'll see this. We're summarizing multiple questions here for the purposes of this presentation, and I would encourage you to see as part of the staff report and the agenda package, there was, I believe, a more detailed summary of those responses. But we really had, in terms of the support for the project, we had a real interest in the idea of this being a model of development, a model form of development that could be replicated elsewhere and really start to raise the bar in terms of sensitivity and yeah, a better way of working in community design. There was also articulated real appreciation for the Community Hub program and that idea of accommodating that within the plan. Of course, the green space and the parkland dedication and the trail connections. In the segment who were generally uncertain or limited in their support, there was a question and an expressed interest in the provision of affordable housing, and a question as to how that was being accommodated within the concept as it currently stands, as well as some concern around the impact with habitat and recreational use areas. There was also an interest in making sure that equestrian uses could be accommodated within the parks and trails programs as proposed. And finally, in the portion of responses that were generally lacking in support, there was a real question around the location and the concern around environmental objectives of the project and whether or not it was fundamentally at odds with that, concern around traffic impacts. And I think the other 2 points were, maybe to a lesser extent, the idea that this would somehow take away from other priorities in the district and other financial responsibilities. And finally, I think there was some lack of clarity in terms of the district's role in implementation and what this concept plan, how it would then lead into subsequent steps in the process around clarifying the concept, developing a design, and whether the district would play a role as developer or whether that would be engaging with a third party and how that relationship might work. Interestingly enough, around the park component of this, I think it was very interesting that 39% of survey respondents were not aware of the nature park dedication and the community park dedication as kind of core to the proposal. So they weren't aware that the nature park in particular was a big part of the underlying assumption of creating the eco village, and certainly that more than half here, 56% of those respondents believing that preservation was highly relevant and really central to the viability as the eco village calling itself sustainable. And finally, there was this general support and preference for the medium density option. Again, I think the townhouse form is certainly a more manageable, sort of friendly street presence, and it certainly phases more simply from a development standpoint. I think the real question here is from a feasibility standpoint and from a housing diversity, attainability, affordability spectrum, to what extent we want to see this land more intensively utilized towards its goals as an eco village versus trying to dial down the sort of form and character and scale of development in light of this preference. So again, this would just be a question that I would put back to the larger team and council. In terms of how we've then updated the concept from a lot of this input, we've made a few small refinements that I'll just list here. We've wanted to make sure that we indicated contiguous parking, avoiding those large contiguous parking areas and emphasizing the idea of parking pockets along streets and incorporating that within the street cross section. That we want to make sure that these streets are designed to really a minimum standard to ensure walkability, traffic calming, making sure that we have great pedestrian connectivity through trails, but also sidewalks and things that link pedestrians along these streets. That we make sure to be clear around requirements to be consistent with the principles of Fire Smart. We recognize this is a real concern in this area and many others like it in the Okanagan, and particularly in light of climate change and fire seasons. So we have that within our design guidelines, but we want to just make sure that we're articulating that clearly. Again, emphasizing the idea or the commitment that those areas of highest environmental sensitivity, those ESA 1 areas, are avoided in the development planning. And finally, that we'll be managing stormwater on site through low impact development best practices so that post-development conditions will mimic pre-development. And again, we'll see that through our civil design guidelines that we have attached to the report, as well as architectural and landscape architectural design guidelines. We also incorporated this, there's a note there on the site plan around the opportunity for on-site food production, within some of those community green spaces. So recommendations for next steps. This is where I'll hand it back to Brad, but here we had just 3 of those notes from what we had heard. Ongoing engagement and communication with the public and stakeholders in terms of those interests and concerns that have been voiced. Really trying to stress again, and I think you've done a good job of this with the website and information that's provided to date, but clearly there's a need to continue to clarify that relationship between the solar project and the Eco Village project, and where those are opportunities to sort of connect those things, and where they're clearly need to keep those projects separate in terms of timelines and development process and who's doing what. And then finally, clarity around the district's role in the Eco Village and how the development process might unfold through all of the necessary steps towards implementation. So with that, I believe I will stop sharing my screen and I'll pass it back to Brad for some final comments.
Thanks, Edward, for walking us all through the thought process, and yeah, very excited with the concept plan that's been prepared for our consideration. The slide, I have one more slide just for council's benefit, is a next step slide. It's at the very end of my presentation there, Greg. Page 19 of the concept plan itself, provided by Modus, provides a series of implementation items for the district to pursue as next steps. And in terms of, if we are planning to bring forward the concept plan at a future council meeting to get final approval. This is just a presentation of the draft, but say if council is to give us a final approval of the concept plan, the next steps would be these things listed on the slide, in terms of staff working on a comprehensive development zone. That would be the zoned area that we'd want to potentially sell to a developer, and most likely then initiate that rezoning and OCP amendment that would be required. We'd also at the same time look to rezone the park areas, the solar and storage public utility lot area that would be retained by the district. We would probably at a concurrent time frame also start proceeding with road closure bylaws for the existing road right-of-ways that are found on the district's property, as well as do a consolidation of the multiple parcels we have to then re-subdivide the lands following the rezoning to be in conformance with the plan. We may do some preliminary negotiations for rights of way for access, for example, for sewer extension, as well as traffic access as well. And then before we would entertain and move forward with an RFP, we'd also draft some restrictive covenants to place on the parcel to secure the parcel in the form and character and following the concept plan and the guidelines that are provided by Modus as well as their subconsultants to ensure that the way that we have developed this property to be developed will be developed in the way that it moves forward with a private developer. And then final of that would be to move forward with a request for proposals process for land sale, which would be the final step, most likely after all of the above is completed. So that would be our next steps for this project. But happy to take any questions from council at this point in time as well. I think Edward and Jessica are both on that line for any questions for their presentation. Thank you.
Who would like to start? And just if you could start your comments or questions with a indication of if this is for Modus or if it's more in-house. Councillor Holmes.
I'll start with the easy ones. Not sure who it's for, Modus, I guess. Just in respect to the community hub, I'm a little confused about what is actually envisioned for this community hub. Is it a physical building? Is it kind of an outdoor shelter like what we have in Spirit Square? And if it's a building, who's going to own that building? Does it become a district facility, and which we'll have to maintain?
Great questions. I think the idea is we want to make sure that we don't lose an opportunity for that space. That idea of the gathering space, and then thinking more about what would make that space successful over time for a range of uses. That's where we started to think, okay, would it just be an open space? Would it just be, we've got parkland dedication. What would be different here? The idea that you could even see farm gate sales. I shouldn't say farm gate sales because that would be on site, but the idea that you might have a small market stand that would operate during the summer season. So where would you accommodate that within a typical neighborhood design? And the answer is, I'm not sure that you would. So we wanted to think about accommodating that social space. To your point around who builds it, who maintains it, that's always a good question. I would imagine this as being, as we see in a lot of again, in these sort of medium density and higher density residential developments that are master planned, the opportunity to have strata owned but publicly accessible space. You're going to have park dedication adjacent, right? These larger, kind of more typical park spaces. What would it look like if that hub was actually affiliated with a multifamily development site? So that as part of what would typically maybe be an amenity building that isn't necessarily used very often, that it's instead designed as a beautiful outdoor pavilion, like it wouldn't necessarily be conditioned. It could be a covered structure. Anyway, I think there's a lot of design opportunity there, and you'd certainly want to find the right developer who'd be interested in exploring that, which I think you're market selecting a little bit in this vision in and of itself. This won't be a conventional development approach. So I think you're hopefully well positioned to have that design discussion with a developer at that stage, at that future stage. I hope that helps.
Does it help? Okay, please go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just to add on to Edward's comments, I think that there's a lot of opportunity still left with that hub concept to achieve that village vision of the eco village project, and that's kind of the idea of the hub. And we had just as another opportunity, we had some preliminary discussion with Penticton Indian Band on that specific building itself, not just the eco village concept plan, but some interest in maybe there'd be programming opportunity with Penticton Indian Band through this community hub. So there is a lot to still be fleshed out. I think that there will be some opportunity again with the developer, as Edward pointed out, to to get them to maybe for us to leverage the concept, the land as our asset that we're bringing to the table with what a developer can provide us in the forms of community amenities. This being one. Yeah, I think that'd be it.
You said you had other questions as well, so we'll come. Yes, absolutely. Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Thanks very much. What was presented is very exciting for someone like me. I think Summerland, we can't get left behind again, so we need to get out in front of this. The question is whether there are any examples of a successful, maybe not eco-village, but maybe a strata where they have had a developer with a forward-thinking proposal and where the right people have ended up living in that facility as the owners, and that's part of it, is that there's a mindset I think that's required for this. Is there a precedent for this, or are we really thinking up something that we just want to be true and something that could potentially happen if the right people bought it at the right time?
A great question. I think, I think there are eco-village examples, which are much more like co-housing examples of that. And I can share some of those with you, but where they would have, inviting the public into a certain space for certain reasons. I've seen that in the context of more agricultural program where there's an eco-village and they have some farm operation and then they invite the public into a space where they would have a market. So there's more of that farm gate space. So for this being slightly different, and as we were envisioning it more as the mixture of this sort of trailhead opportunity and maybe environmental interpretation, maybe cross-cultural learning opportunity with the Penticton Indian Band, maybe it's even recycling on site with structure support for that. A whole range of different ideas that you might draw together through the concept program. I think this would be different, but I do think that there is good precedent for it. It might just be blending a few of those precedents, but it's a great question and certainly one to dig more deeply into.
Yeah, just a follow-up then. So maybe it might be actually more for our Director of Development Services. So I note that the implementation next steps include landowner rights of way, restricted covenants, because we're going to sell the parcel, and have a request for proposals to sell the parcel. And I guess the question is, I don't think we've really talked about whether or not we're going to sell that parcel of land. And if the federal government just announced that they're going to invest a whole bunch of money in co-op housing, so why can't we be talking about that? And has that come up through the process, either with the consultants or with the public? There's people concerned about affordable housing. There's a co-op model that works quite well, and Vancouver's got hundreds of them. I would like to put that out there for people to think about. I don't know if that's something we need to necessarily make a decision on and discuss today, because co-op housing is a big thing to try and understand before we even make that kind of conversation. But I think that the district owns this piece of property. It seems to me like there's people that have always wanted it developed. There's people that don't want it developed. There's people that want affordable housing. There's people that think it can never be affordable housing. So maybe we should talk about if there's a potential to find some safe ground there.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question through to Modus, if I may. High density versus medium density. Could you have any indication on how many units in high, how many units in medium, and what the difference is?
We do indeed. And I don't have those numbers top of mind. Maybe Brad and even Jessica, if you're there and seeing it. I would say in terms of scale and size, what we were imagining was wood frame. So really thinking about, you know, we were really thinking 4 stories. Maybe you still hold it within that typical 4 to 6, depending on, you've got a lot of slope to consider here. And so maybe you've got 6 on one side, 4 on another. Anyway, I don't want to get into the real details of that because I think there are lots of other questions around what's driving that larger form before you get into like how tall is it. But to put a bit of a frame on the top end of that, we were thinking wood frame and not thinking anything that would really push you into much higher building heights in a concrete form. I think that speaks to the building form question. Jessica popped in, and I think she's got a number from the concept. Can you share that with us, Jessica?
Yeah, that's right. So in the townhome concept, that came to 96 units, and in the apartment one, 152. So we're not talking about huge variations there in unit count.
Yeah, and so that what that really boils down to in terms of the way we would build a concept like this is we would say, okay, 8 units to the floor plate, 4 stories. Again, just bulking out numbers and not wanting to overcount but there's a whole lot of design that would then go into, well, what is that building size? What's the unit mix? How many units are in that building? Are we looking for, same building size, smaller units, more of them, fewer units for families? Those are, anyway, there are a whole bunch of design questions there, but that's generally how those 2 options perform in moving from all ground oriented in the townhouses being around that 100 unit mark. And then once you introduce a couple of apartment sites, you can then boost that density up until around the 150 unit mark, roughly, as we're considering it now.
You have a follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, just I guess in my thinking is that higher density would be a lower price point. More units could be more affordable. So that was my thinking on that. And my other question, I guess, would be, it's more of a comment, I guess, than a question, but maybe a bit of clarification. I think we've invested 70,000 so far on this, and then the concern that this would take investment away from other district priorities such as road improvements. I think the long-term vision here is once this land is possibly sold to a developer, I think we're looking in, I'm going to say millions in land sales, not counting the adjacent properties that now will be able to develop their lands because they'll have access to sewer. So I think the money coming into the corporation, into the district of Summerland will certainly outweigh the 70,000 that we've invested so far. And I think it's a small investment for a possible very large return. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And as Councillor Carlson pointed out a minute ago, we haven't really, had that discussion, but you're absolutely right. I wanted to go back to Brad because I missed his response with further comment on Councillor Carlson's questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just wanted to comment that, yeah, we haven't discussed yet the next step, although it has been pointed out with regards to owner or selling it or retaining it ourselves. It is definitely our staff's recommendation, though, that we proceed as per the implementation framework that the consultants provided on page 19. We do have a lot of competing priorities at the staff level to try to manage, say, perhaps multi-million-dollar residential development as a as one project of many of district's priorities, it would be difficult for us to move it forward. But could be something we could consider, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But that's not really the point of the discussion today. That might be a next step discussion. But right now, we want to make sure that the concept plan is the right concept plan that council wants to proceed with.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could we have maybe page 11 up on the screen? Some big questions and little questions, but.
On the consultant slides
Well,
or
on
the
our-
developments
yeah,
or our
I'm looking
development
at
services slides?
The consultant slides.
Consultant slides, thank you.
And sorry, just to clarify, is that of the presentation?
Yes, the presentation.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry, just one moment. 11, you say?
Yeah, or 11 or 13, maybe 13 has both high density, low density on it.
That's the one. Got it.
Yeah. I guess I would say, and I don't know if we're not making any decisions that way at this time, but I was surprised to see the concern about the density, because I personally would lean towards high density as much, maybe not as much as we can possibly get, sort of thing, but towards higher density rather than maybe medium high, 1 or 2 apartment buildings. Okay. I certainly liked what you'd suggested about not having like larger parking areas, like to be able to park on the street. And I noticed that a lot of the bikers, they park here already, and there's no competition for parking in this area because it's just orchard and stuff like that. So if that was considered in the overall plan, being able to park like there and along the street rather than having a big parking lot, certainly I really like that idea. What about the access to this area for development? It's relatively level, and is this going to sort of landlock and make that undevelopable, or?
I may need to defer to Brad to give me some guidance
Yes,
here as
because
to where
he
you
may
were
not have heard
pointing.
him,
I
and you
couldn't
certainly
see
couldn't
that.
see his hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, please go ahead, Brad.
So we, as mentioned in my presentation as well as in Edward's, we have had a lot of preliminary discussions with adjacent landowners. For that one in particular, where Councillor Barkwell was referencing, thanks for the pointer. Yeah, we've had engagement with that landlord specifically. In fact, that high density apartment building there, it's not on district's property. So that would be one node that we wouldn't develop ourselves, or wouldn't be even the developer that we sold our land to developing ourselves. But however, that is in conformance with that landowner's vision for his property, and is a multifamily type orientated development located in proximity to the eco-village, and to actually form part of that village feel of our vision, and that's why it's shown in our concept plan. We wouldn't be the one to move it forward. It'd be entirely their responsibility to move that part of the project forward, because it is on their land. But we do see some synergy with, of course, with that kind of development going forward with our eco-village concept plan. And yeah, there is a potential for an access road to get up to Sunset Place from there. It is a 12% grade. It is significant to get up from there, but there is potential maybe for further development as a road goes up. I'm not too sure, but that would be up to that landowner to move that forward.
Okay, that's great. I didn't realize that particular unit wasn't part of, the land that's in the district-owned land. Is that, let's say it's 4 stories and 32 units, is that included in the total that we heard earlier? Is that just the district when we had 190 was the max or something?
It is included.
Okay, thanks. One big question I guess I have, and I don't know if there's an answer to that, but is if we sold this project to a developer, well, it would be a huge project for one person. or one developer, would we be able to put the road in ourselves and then sell various lots and just let the developer build, the type of structure that we envision on those through zoning? Wouldn't we get the best value if we looked after the installation of the road ourselves?
That's good. That's a good question, Councilor Barkle. Thank you, through your worship. There could be definitely, like, there is a need for us to do some preliminary work before we go forward with any type of sale process. That road closure of those existing right of ways and a subdivision is required regardless. To subdivide parcels off, the park area that we want to maintain is a district managed park, which is a substantial amount of the property that we own, to protect and conserve the ESA 1 areas, as well as the solar and storage public utility lot will need to be separated out, given a different zoning, as well as more probably an institutional zoning for that lot. So there may be an opportunity through that process to also maybe look at, okay, well, maybe we want to also have a different parcel for the north neighborhood area, which is smaller scale, lower density, versus more of the higher density forms of development to the south. There would be opportunity to reflect and review that even as early as the rezoning stage, as we get into the rezoning and how we want to get it zoned. So potentially.
I guess that didn't sort of really address it would take a fair bit of capital to put the road in. And, and as to what you were saying earlier, I can see that we would want, if we took that sort of a job on to, there's like 3 engineering firms, you pick one, they do the work, in this area, it's the same firms that, a developer would use, and then we would need to hire more staff. And this is don't you think that's the way to go?
You want my opinion on that? I think that we could extend the road ourselves, so that's going to add value to the project. But I think that there's already going to be enough value from the concept plan itself, the development idea. I'm already getting interest from potential developers in wanting to participate, even though it's just an idea, a conceptual idea right now. There probably will be funding available to extend the road through private sources. Again, it's entirely what we want to do ourselves versus what we want to put on the back of the developer, how much control we want to have on certain elements of it. But I don't think the economics of it, if you recall back to the feasibility study, which we had associate engineering help in terms of the cost per lot that we originally looked at, this site is highly achievable from a development perspective. The costs, the grades, it all makes sense. And so even with the extension of roads, water, and sewer into the property, it makes an economic sense and a business case sense to do it. So whether it's us or a private developer doing it, I think that there'll be the economic case to do it. It's how much do we want to do ourselves versus and adding the value to the potential lots or not.
Thank you. And just if I could, I don't know who has an answer to this, but yeah, I've heard lots of news that there's been.
Can I just interrupt for a sec? I'll come back to you, Councillor Barkwell. It's just that I need to make sure that everybody has the chance to ask their questions. So I promise to come back to you, and I'm going to direct my eyes to Councillor Patton. Do you have any questions at this time?
No, I don't, Madam Mayor. I do agree with Councillor Holmes in regards to the public washroom facility in the hub. I believe that that would have to be a strata, where the strata would own the building and maintain. I don't think that the district would want to venture into that area. But all in all, I'm very excited. I think both the medium and high density are are great ways to look at. So I'm looking forward to moving this forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Some are related to what has already been asked. I just wanted to check, Councillor Holmes, you had other questions as well, right? Okay, so I'm just going to ask a question about the medium versus higher density, building out of that. Does it have to be one or the other?
No, certainly not. And I think that, it's a great question. And a lot of what we're talking about, I think a lot of these questions come into the implementation question and kind of value creation, whether or not how much the district wants to take on itself, where there's value capture in doing that versus risk and capacity, all the way to, do we want to individually parcel these off so that we can kind of target different market developers, how that would happen within a master plan, or whether it's trying to find a developer or a development partner who would want to take on the whole thing. Beyond even that question, once you get into that one multifamily site, if the concept shows upward potential of that a certain form, you could build flexibility into that CD zone that could identify a sub area, and it could speak to a range, and you could then effectively offer, I think there's another layer of land economics here where you're going to want to certainly get the best value for the asset that you're selling here. And at that stage, it would be up to a developer to then determine what makes the most sense for building that out. And that may be, very much based on existing market demand. They may see that a stacked townhouse or a townhouse is something that's simpler to build in terms of phasing. Maybe from a development standpoint, bringing on one building that's 30 to 40 units is too large a pill to swallow for that, that moment in the market. And the townhouse form is going to be something that's much easier to do because you can build it in 4s and 6s. So those are all, that's a really great question. And you could certainly hybridize this plan where certain sites where we've shown condos could turn into a townhouse form, and vice versa. You could even combine, like there are ways of probably even considering ways that some of these parcels could include a condo form and a townhouse form. So lots of flexibility there. And I think that will serve the ultimate plan well to maintain somewhat flexibility as long as it's meeting some of those environmental performance requirements.
Good, thank you very much for that. I'm only going to ask one more question at this time because Councillor Holmes has more questions, as does Councillor Barkwell. But it has to do with something that you just said, and that is, and I had a question about the comprehensive design. That's what CD stands for, right? Yeah. Comprehensive development, yeah. Comprehensive development zone. You just mentioned the term subzone within the comprehensive. Sorry, but I heard that. I'm wondering if that is the way, if council chooses, and I know that it's not necessarily all for us to choose, but if that is a way to incorporate more mixed housing, so townhomes and maybe a smaller apartment building, I don't really know. Is that the way to do that, is to indicate sub zones within the CD zone? I guess I'm asking Brad this question.
Yeah, Your Worship, you're correct. Yeah, we can do that as part of a CD zone. And the CD zone allows us to create something unique for this parcel. It doesn't have to be consistent across the entire zone. There's other examples of use of comprehensive development zones throughout BC, where there are the sub areas that are zoned and have different criteria depending on the form and character that we're wanting to see in a specific area of this development. So that would be kind of our next implementation, probably I would say step is to look at for creating this CD zone that would be reflect the eco-village concept plan, and it will take some staff time to really think about the criteria that will need to be included for each sub area as well, to draft this comprehensive development zone. But I think that would be our path forward, and it could include some mixed forms of density. And I would also echo Edward's point about flexibility as well. Still allow for flexibility for whoever does move forward with development, whether it's us or a private developer, to be able to evaluate market conditions and look at different forms, but still meeting the intent of this sub area in terms of number of units, perhaps overall density, but maybe it's a different type of form than what we've initially envisioned for that area.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that response from both of you. We've been hearing for many, many years that we need to have mixed forms of housing and move away from the single family home, especially in this day and age of the rising housing costs. I totally understand how the high density, perhaps you're getting less, more attainable housing. But at the same time, for me, an eco-village concept that has that community feel, like essentially you're building a community within a community. And I really like the sustainable aspects and the common areas that you have envisioned in your concept plan. I think that aligns better, but that's just my personal opinion. I am going to go back to Councillor Holmes for his next couple of questions, and then over to you, Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you very much. So yeah, in respect to the density, I guess I would like to know, if you build a 4-story building up there, what would that look like from a distance or from down in the valley looking up to it? Would you not even notice it, or would it be sticking out like a sore thumb? I think that's something that, I would certainly like to know. And, maybe my gut feeling is maybe what the mayor was leading to. That high density apartment buildings might be better placed downtown than in a location like this. And there might be other ways to achieve density and affordability, such as tiny houses or something like that. But I don't know. I have a lot of questions, and I think the concerns raised in the surveys about traffic impact, that's something we need to consider. And so I'm just wondering what's not considering that this is going to be it's not just going to be residents that are going there. There'll be a lot more people than now going there to access the trails once it becomes more official. There'll be people that the solar facility will be an attraction, so there'll be a lot more traffic there already. So I don't know at what point do we consider the traffic impact. So there's a couple of questions in there, I think. So.
Through your worship to Councillor Holmes, definitely I think in terms of the overall district's goals in terms of housing affordability, we're trying to encourage more high density forms within the downtown core. The council will see that as part of our recommendations with the downtown neighborhood plan that will be coming forward to council in the next few months, and envisioning some higher density than what we've historically had here within the downtown core. That's definitely where we see where we can achieve make some real dent with regards to our affordable housing goals for the community. Now, I still think that there might be some opportunity for affordable and attainable housing through this development. 4 stories, I'm not too sure on the visual impact. We'll have to do a little more analysis on that, on the visual impact to the surrounding neighborhood. But a lot of these more technical studies, including a traffic impact assessment, will happen at a later point of the development process. I think that from drafting of the rezoning and getting into the details of the rezoning process. Keep in mind, with an OCP amendment as well, there will be more opportunity for public engagement, more requirement for technical understanding of the impacts of potential development, even though it is the district putting this forward. And there could be the need for higher review of these type of questions through that process. And then as well, moving onwards to, if we are to move forward with a sale to a developer might be have some onus on them before we administer any development permits for multifamily, because we do require multifamily development permits looking at the form and character of that multifamily building that's being proposed to these areas, that it's meeting our intent of the eco-village concept plan and also the zoning, but also some of the technical studies that might be required for a certain building or project as part of the eco-village master plan that's being proposed. So I think that a lot of these technical studies are still going to happen. Another one that's on our radar in discussions with PIB is an archaeological impact assessment that's more detailed and more site invasive as well. So we do recognize that there's further work that still needs to be done on the site from a technical perspective as well.
Okay, Councillor Holmes. Okay, Councillor Barkwell, thank you for your patience.
Just a comment on the traffic part. Yeah, I'm sure that there'll be traffic engineers who figure that out. It's going to be a bit of a tight corner to come up Morrow and turn right on there, but they've got engineers that worry about that. I just wondered, we've heard that there's billions of dollars from the federal government for housing, and I haven't been able to see any specifics. Does anybody have any general ideas of whether this might fit with any of that? No, I guess we'll have to wait for more specifics from the feds. Okay, thanks. That was sort of my question.
I'll go to Graham for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did seek for it. I couldn't find anything, but what we can reasonably assume is that it will take time for them to roll out those programs, create the criteria by which one can be successful for those dollars. And as we know from things like grant processes and working with the federal government, it's likely that their timeline is more extended than potentially the timeline that we're working against on this.
Did you say that was the end of your questions, or?
I guess I would just say, echo maybe what some others have said, that I'm really enthusiastic about this plan. I would say it's better than I had hoped for.
Great. I have just a couple more questions. They're fairly straightforward. I'll start by saying to both Modus and Brad with Development Services that I'm really pleased that there is this continuing engagement. And, I look at it as certainly well beyond the typical consultation thing with the Penticton Indian Band. So I'm really glad to see that. I think that there are mutual opportunities there, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing. I wanted to ask, and this is probably a silly question, but this has to do with one of your slides, Brad, and it shows the sewer extension. And in yellow, it shows existing Deer Ridge. It's in the Sunset Place area. Does that mean that those pipes are already under the ground? No, it doesn't.
Sorry, just to clarify that, I'll just pull up that slide, make sure I'm looking at the right colored area on the line here. So I think what that reference is just that these were existing properties in Deer Ridge. There is a private operated community system there in Sunset Place, just for that one neighborhood in cul-de-sac. So our proposed plan for the sewer extension was to connect into that pipe system for that specific cul-de-sac and use that infrastructure, but that would be the extent of any existing infrastructure that we would be using with the sewer extension.
Okay, thank you. That was that question. Let's see, on slide, well, it's on a number of slides, but if we look at slide, what number is this? If we look at slide 12, that shows the higher density and the medium density, or even 11, you can see it a little bit better. It shows the cross-hatched areas, which are the ESA1 areas. And then it shows on the south side, so closest to where the solar farm will go. I think it's a roundabout, and then it shows access, I guess, further south on Cartwright. My question is, and I think I see this, but my question is, with the larger ESA1 that we're looking at a potential parkland for, is there a connection from that larger piece to the smaller piece to the west? It looks like there is by the, I think it's a roundabout. Yes, right where you are there. Is there a wildlife corridor through there?
So I think the thing that this map doesn't indicate is the extension of that ESA1 onto the lands beyond. And so, you know, this polygon would continue down and sort of take over the full nose. And we were only showing resolution within the parcel boundary, excuse me, of the district lands. And so, you know, you're right that sort of the idea of terminating the through traffic and making the connection to the park does extend very close to the PL itself, largely because of some site constraints and that platform. But in many ways, as a detailed design refinement, you know, you could imagine that access being pulled back and a larger sort of green edge being maintained on the district lands and not having to count on connectivity to the lands beyond, as an example.
Okay, great. Did you want to add something, Brad?
Yeah, I just want to preface there Edward's comments that we still need to do some more investigation of that area at a more, like he said, detailed design stage as to where specifically that road will go and how it relates to the adjacent landowner to the north, to the south, and what their plans may be as well for future development. So things could still change in the future with regards to that south connection.
And what you don't necessarily see in the plan view is that, and this actually speaks a little bit to the previous councillor's question around visual impact. You know, these two sites are certainly nestled kind of in a low between the ridge line here and the height of land here. So these sit sort of in a bit of a bowl. And similarly, as we know, that solar site's quite flat, but then it actually climbs to a secondary sort of high point here. So again, that sits a little bit below as well. So there is obviously some terrain at play.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Holmes, and then I'll come back.
I guess more of a comment. I too am quite excited by what I see here. But I'm also a little, I think we need to proceed cautiously about just selling it to a developer and expecting that we're going to get what we want. I am still, you know, I fresh in my mind is the old RCMP site and the pocket the great plans for a pocket neighborhood there, and that never materialized and likely never will materialize. And so I think we need to make sure that that we get what we envision and that we get it when we envision it, and it's not just seen as an opportunity for a land grab, sit on it, and then sometime down the road something is built there that that we never really wanted to be built there. So that's my concern, and I think we need to be involved in in it as much as we can to ensure that what we want to happen there does happen.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's why it would be sold with a restricted covenant attached to the sale, which will spell out what we're looking for and possible timelines, and all that can be included in a restricted covenant. Same as the RCMP site. If it was sold with one, it wouldn't have been flipped this many times. They would have had a timeline to develop, and if not, it would have reverted back to the district of Summerland. Thank you.
Okay. This is another, I think, easy. Oh, go ahead, Graham.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, just sort of augment that thinking that Councillor Van Alphen has identified. And certainly we would be, in the context that a sale were to happen, it'd be restrictive covenants on title for the overall vision, but also quite specifically with concept plan guidelines to ensure the sustainability elements are properly built in. We could certainly consider the timeline concepts as well. There's other advantages too, from my perspective, for having private sector developer to come in. It seems like a big project to Summerland, but frankly, if we attract a large private sector developer with capabilities to deliver on a project like this, it's not a large project really in the big scheme of things to many of those developers. So I think to some extent having enough sort of critical mass for a project like this gets it to the place where there could be significant interest from a reputable developer that'll actually deliver in accordance with those requirements. And I also believe that working with one partner can get you to a level of consistency in that sort of turnkey idea. So you have an overall look and feel that is not disjointed, but is one that is consistent, is developed and coordinated, and has some of that volume that they're looking for in order to achieve their profits in that context as well. So we've done a lot of the heavy lifting because of council's good guidance to us in that the Indigenous consultation that's been undertaken, the environmental studies that have taken place, fire hazard surveys, archaeological considerations, geotechnical, planning, development, and engineering considerations for feasibility, public consultation. So all of these things do add value to a potential partner. And then if we take steps further, and again, we'll see what happens on the 25th with decision making, but if we take steps further to do things like consider subdivision and the right zoning and these sort of things, this also adds certainty to a developer who might be interested, or several developers that are looking at doing that. So certainly it is our strong recommendation that we would go out on more of a land sale context if we go out, just because of the capacity and pressures that staff are feeling. At the end of the day, though, we'll definitely be delivering on whatever council's preferred model is, but those are some of the reasons why we've made the recommendation that we've made.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just further to that, if I may, like an individual developer may purchase it, but they may have 10, 15 different developers that they sub to that'll build custom homes there, but up to their criteria, to their design guidelines. So it's not just possibly one developer building every home.
Okay, so I think this was in the MODIS slides. It mentioned on-site stormwater management will mimic pre-development conditions. Are you talking about things like, precipitation capture through rain gardens and that kind of thing? Or is it, maybe you could explain more about what you mean about that. And I think I saw natural asset management in there as well. So could you comment a bit more on that, please?
Absolutely, and I would also offer, to reference the report itself, because there are some substantial appendices to that in terms of guidelines that would give some more detail here. But generally, wanting to see best practices in low impact development. So I think I was speaking at that moment in the presentation around parking design and how we would want to treat parking, recognizing that there would be a larger number of people who would want to come and visit in the trailhead, and sort of the park trip generation around a park, a destination park. And how do you do that without introducing a bunch of paved surfaces that generate more stormwater than you want to be managing? So simply, there's no real rocket science to this. The idea is to minimize the extent of it, break it up. So make all these areas, reduce your impervious surface coverage, break it up, and treat it in smaller, sort of decentralized areas. And that's where we see the street design as an opportunity to do that, instead of concentrating things in surface lots. But beyond just parking, we can see that through architectural guidelines around green roofs and the ability to effectively just slow rainwater down on site when we do have rain events, making sure that we capture that water on site. We don't concentrate it on site. We hold it and release it slowly back into the environment like it would behave in a pre-development scenario. So that's the general idea. In terms of natural asset management, I think that goes hand in hand in terms of the stormwater conversation. I think we would also, and you can see this through the detail around the landscape design guidelines, really wanting to think about the native plant palette here, and wanting to make sure that we don't sort of introduce a whole lot of plant material that might be more management intensive, that might, certainly we don't want to introduce invasives, and that's probably the strongest language that we see in the design guidelines is around prohibiting certain things, like effectively saying you may not use these things, and where we do allow for certain ornamental species that might be non-native for certain reasons, seasonal interest or whatever that might be, making sure that they're hardy and that they don't require heavy management, irrigation and things like that. So that's why we are careful in plant selection as well. So I think there are layers to that, whether it's low impact development, water use, or cultural interest and interpretation there around the native plant palettes on site and restoration. I think there are lots of good reasons to approach that thoughtfully, and we've tried to show that in the appendices.
Good, thank you. Just for your information, the appendices are not attached to the draft report that council received, but that's okay because we know where to find Brad. So that's
Great.
good. Brad, I have one final question for you, and that is, this has to do with zoning again. And maybe this is well, I'll get the answer first and then we'll see. We have already talked about the CD zone and the subzones, and the solar project would need to be a different zoning institutional, I think you said. I'm wondering, so the parkland, the park zoning is separate from either of those as well, right? Okay, so I'm wondering if, because we're trying to formalize that the trail system through there and get it off of the, no longer have that conflict with private landowners. I'm wondering if, regardless of whether or not the eco-village goes ahead, we could consider, and I know that this is a question of council and things as well, but I would like to see if we can consider rezoning that piece anyways to dedicated park.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I think that all of this will be brought forward around the same time to council as part of like a master planning exercise for the site and rezoning in conformance with the concept plan. So we will be moving forward with a rezoning amendment as if we do get, you know, council's approval of the concept plan that will include all the park areas that are going to be dedicated as park. It'll include rezoning to parkland. It'll include the solar and storage facility in that lot, which will have the institutional zoning, and also this comprehensive development zone, and it'll clearly indicate which areas are being rezoned to what, because right now it's just a blanket one zone that's over across all of the district's land right there. So that would be our process, and we would also at the same time for that area that we are dedicating as park, want to subdivide it as well. So creating a parcel boundary around that area and having it coincide with the new rezoned area. Right now, the lot lines don't jive with the proposed park areas that are defined here. So we could go forward with the rezoning, but it would be transecting different parcels and it would perhaps complicate it. And so my recommendation would be that we would do it all consistently and together as for a whole master planning type of exercise of the rezoning, and then also the subdivision happening concurrently with that. Now, even if the rezoning does, or even if say the rezoning doesn't get moved forward, we could come back at a later point to just deal with the park individually. But even, you know, I think council would have the opportunity to even decide on land ownership and sale following the rezoning. So maybe there's not as much risk with regards to just the rezoning itself at this point in time.
Good, thank you very much. Those are all the questions I had. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
Can I bring the recommendation forward, Madam Mayor? Thank you. That the Eco Village Concept Plan 13500 Prairie Valley Road report from the Director of Development Services dated April 11, 2022 be received for information.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? All in favor? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Modus, for being here with us. Shouldn't call you Modus. Mr. Porter and Ms. Mann, thank you. And Brad, for all of your, I know this has been a lot, but it's really great to get to this stage. And as the other councillors have expressed, there's a fair bit of excitement around the table about this. So thank you. And so thank you to Councillor Van Elfen once again for bringing this forward to council in the first place. Okay. Any last words, Brad? Okay. All right. So now we're on to, oh boy, we're way over time, but whatever. 7.2, license of occupation for the 2022 Sunday market. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to recuse myself at this time because I have a direct conflict as a vendor of this possible market.
Thank you. I wonder if I should be recusing myself as well. I assumed it was because of his relationship with the market manager, but.
I mean, what if I decide to sell chairs?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it could happen.
Yeah. And there'd only be one or two people left here. Okay, so I'm going to take Councillor Carlson's comments to heart, and we'll proceed with this license of occupation. I believe this is for Kendra.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Summerland Rotary Club has requested the use of a portion of the downtown core for the Summerland Sunday Market. The event will take place over 14 weeks, running from June 26th to September 24th. The total hours of operation for the event are from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., including setup and takedown. However, the market will be open to the public from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. A license of occupation is recommended for this event to outline the items related to the event, including the term, the fee, the hours of operation, the location, and the certificate of insurance required by the district. As for the road closure for this event, the location was approved by council previously, and the Director of Works and Infrastructure has the delegated authority to issue permits in accordance with Policy 400.5, temporary road, sidewalk, and parking stall closure. An application for the road closure for the event has been submitted by the Summerland Rotary Club and has been circulated to internal departments for consideration prior to the issuance of the permit to ensure that all requirements of the district and emergency services are met. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Any questions for a corporate officer? Councillor Holmes.
So they never had a license of occupation before?
They previously have had one, 2016 is as far back as I looked, but they're just the term of the event.
So year over year.
So so they have had one in the past?
Yeah, but it expires, each license of occupation has expired at the end, like each September for that event.
Okay, I don't ever remember it coming to us previously, but, well, maybe I was just asleep. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, could I have someone bring forward the motion, please? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute a license of occupation for the Summerland Rotary Sunday Market for the 2022 season.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Holmes. Further discussion? I'm glad to see it back on our main street. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. Okay, so on to 7.3. Code of Conduct. And this is for Kendra again. That's right.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this presentation and report is to follow up on previous council direction and for council to consider on whether or not council would like to adopt a code of conduct for its members, and if so, for council to provide further direction on the key elements to enable staff to draft a code of conduct to be brought back for consideration. So at the August 23rd, 2021 regular council meeting, council directed staff to draft a report for consideration regarding a council code of conduct to be brought back for first quarter of 2022. This is a bit hard to see. I was hoping it would look a bit better. But additionally, in October of 2021, the province introduced legislative amendments to the community charter regarding codes of conducts. The first of these amendments will require a council to consider adopting a code of conduct within 6 months after their first regular council meeting following a general local election, or if a code of conduct is already established, if it should be reviewed. If the council decides not to establish or review a code of conduct, it must make available to the public a statement for the reasons for its decision. And this can be done usually by resolution. So the second of the amendments to the community charter requires a council that chooses not to establish or review a code of conduct as described in the previous section, that it must reconsider that decision before January 1st of the year of the next general local election. And again, this amendment requires that if council confirms the decision that is the subject of the reconsideration, it must make available to the public a statement for its reasons for its decision. It is important to note that these amendments have received royal assent and will commence upon the adoption of regulation by the Lieutenant Governor and Council. It is expected that this regulation will come into effect late spring, early summer 2022, It is anticipated that these regulations will describe the prescribed principles, matters, and requirements of a code of conduct as described in the community charter, and that must be considered in the process of drafting a code of conduct. So in addition to this, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, the Local Government Management Association, and the Province of British Columbia have partnered to create a working group on responsible conduct in response to a 2016 UBCM resolution that addressed the issue of questionable conduct by local government elected officials. The purpose of this group is to undertake research and policy work to advance the understanding of issues related to responsible conduct and to analyze potential policy approaches to address such issues. The group has published a variety of resources to help local governments understand responsible conduct and to help with the process of developing a code of conduct. Most notably, the group has established a model code of conduct, and the model code of conduct provides council with a set of principles and general standards of conduct that can be used and tailored to help councils develop their own. So the model code of conduct recommends the following sections. It recommends the scope of who the code of conduct will apply to. This could be council, it could apply to council committee members or commission members. The model code of conduct includes key principles and values and identifies these as integrity, respect, accountability, and leadership and collaboration to promote and further responsible conduct. However, if this council chooses the principles that have been listed in the code of ethics could be included as the key principles and values. Second or third, it deals with the standards of conduct to set the general standards to reflect the key principles as described. Examples of this include wording such as members will be truthful, honest, and open in all dealings, and members will treat every person with dignity, understanding, and respect. And the final section, which is optional, is additional provisions or policies that a local government may want or find necessary to include. Examples of these could be gifts and personal benefits, conflict of interest, use of social media, how information is handled, compliance and enforcement processes. Common provisions are outlined and expanded in the attached council report. So upon review of many local governments' code of conducts, there was a wide variety on how codes of conducts were written, and they ranged from heavily detailed to high level or aspirational. The heavily detailed code of conduct goes above and beyond the recommendations in the model code of conduct. It's the wording and the language used in heavily detailed documents are highly prescriptive in the policy statements and to set very clear expectations. The language focused on what must be followed or how a council member must conduct themselves. It is very clear on how a member of council will exemplify the expectation that is described, and examples of specific behaviors or other details are prescribed to elaborate on the standards of conduct as provided. In this example of code of conducts, there's usually an in-depth process for how complaints are handled. An example of this type of code of conduct would be the City of Surrey or the Town of Oliver, and those were attached to the agenda. So this is difficult to see, but this is from the City of Surrey Code of Conduct bylaw, and I used GIFs because it was a section that was in all of the code of conducts that I reviewed. But as you can see, this is very detailed. It sets very clear expectations in regards to GIFs, and it goes above and beyond what is in the community charter, and as well as outlining the procedure on how to handle the acceptance of GIFs. So this would be what you would see for all kind of expectations that are in the code of conducts that are heavily detailed. They just expand on everything. It's really great. So the second example are the mid-level code of conducts. So the code of conducts that fall into this category includes the recommended and optional criteria in the model code of conduct, similar to the heavily detailed. However, the wording focuses on what council members shall do rather than must do. Most included many additional provisions for conduct as well, where additional provisions and standards of conduct are provided. They're not always outlined in depth. However, they typically expand beyond legislation and include statements on what it exemplifies that specific behavior. Normally, this example of a code of conduct has a high level compliance and enforcement clause, and it's not they include a high level compliance and enforcement, but they don't include normally a formal enforcement clause. An example of these would be the City of Prince George and the RDOS, and those were attached to the agenda as well. And then I used the wording for gifts from the City of Prince George and the RDOS. So you can see Prince George's in comparison to the City of Surrey it does not go as in depth, and it reverts back to the community charter. And the RDOS expands a bit further on the topics of gifts, but obviously not as much detail as Surrey's. And then finally, so the last level, or the other side of the spectrum, I guess you could say, some code of conducts were very high level and used a lot of aspirational language. They met the minimum requirements set out in the model code of conduct and did not normally expand on the standards of conduct beyond what is identified in the key principles and values. So these code of conducts kept the wording very general and very aspirational. There's less of a focus on how the council member will demonstrate a standard of behavior and more on the behavior itself. So wording typically includes members will ensure that their actions are consistent with the shared principles and values collectively agreed to by the council or board. Members will follow through on their commitments, correct errors in a timely and transparent manner, and engage in positive communication with the community. Or members will treat every person with dignity, understanding, and respect. And what I found in this was that a compliance and enforcement clause was not typically included. And an example of this code of conduct would be the city of Nanaimo, which was included in the council report as well. So very briefly, that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, what's the difference if you use the word shall versus the word must?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. I think when it comes down to the enforcement and the compliance and the resolution, a council member must, when they must conduct themselves in a way, I don't believe leaves a lot of room for interpretation, and it holds a higher standard, whereas what shall, they shall do it, but I kind of interpret that as they don't have to. Must has more of an enforcement perspective to it.
I had the same question. And then I was thinking shall versus should. And oh, yes. Any other questions? Okay, well, we have some work to do now. And of course, you can ask questions as we go along. One thing that our corporate officer needs from us in order to develop a code of conduct, or sorry, to draft a code of conduct to come back to council, is what are the things that we want to see? And she spoke of kind of the 3 categories. That's what we need to determine. Councillor Holmes.
Well, my approach to these sort of things is usually keep it as simple as possible. If it's simple, it's more effective. If it's really wordy and complicated, it's a lot easier to ignore. If you just take the examples that we were given with the gifts, the Prince George example there was pretty straightforward, and it's easy to understand. You look at the series, you think, oh God, who's going to read that? Right. So that'd be my only input. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. I just have to find my, oops, got too many things open, just a sec. Okay, so included in your package is a document called Getting Started on a Code of Conduct for Your Council or Board, which I guess is a subtitle. The title is Model Code of Conduct. And you can see in the table of contents the different things that ideally you're putting in a code of conduct, and then the optional things. So I certainly agree with what Councillor Holmes has just said. Let's keep it simple. We have had examples of a highly prescriptive one, like the City of Surrey, and then a mid-level one, and then one that is, I can't remember the term you used, but one that is not either of those two. It's aspirational. I think that's how you said. That's how you voiced it. So maybe that's the place to start. We've heard from Councillor Holmes already that maybe having one that goes on for several pages is not necessarily anything that we have enough to read, but at the same time, I feel that it needs to be a code of conduct that has some substance to it, and that it includes the process and the enforceability piece. I think I don't know. I don't know necessarily that it. Well, I won't say anything more about that. Except just to say that if we get this in place before the next election, then it will be up to the new council to determine, yes, this is the way we want to move forward, or let's review this and come up with something that fits us better. So, does anyone have any input on highly prescriptive, mid-level, or aspirational? So I guess maybe, thank you, Councillor Barkwell.
I don't know if aspirational is the word I would use, but I certainly, now that Councillor Holmes has sort of articulated it for me, I see that the something that's readable is what I would prefer, and that's the Prince George model versus Surrey's, which is like, wow. It doesn't seem necessary. So I guess that's where I lean. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here either. If a lot of groups have put a lot of time and thought into a document, and we can just adopt something that's sort of out there without a whole lot of debate, I would think.
So what I'm hearing from what you said is that the mid-level is best suited. You gave the example of City of Prince George, which I believe was a mid-level one. Yeah. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding your.
Yeah, you can call it mid-level, but I still think it is being pretty straightforward.
Okay, Councillor Carlson.
Just say that I agree. I think we don't need to put the community charter into it. I think there's some of these have a lot of extras that are already written somewhere else.
It's a well, mine works.
all good. Thank you, Greg. We have 1 more minute. We'll resume. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Patton, are you okay with us going through a kind of a mid-level one? At least, you know, starting with that, and then we'll see what comes back in the draft, and it can be reviewed again. Yeah. Yep.
That's fine.
Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. One other observation that just kind of came to me in the discussion was council does in their strategic plan have posted council values already. Some of them would be in addition to the basic minimum values that are listed in the guide. And so the guide identifies respect, integrity, accountability, and then leadership and collaboration. But council also has respect, but they've posted honesty, creativity, and transparency also in the strategic plan that's posted publicly. So one option, if we go with the simplified, clear and concise approach, would be to add these additional values to the minimum list that council already has posted. I just thought I would frame that as consideration.
Thanks, Graham. Along those lines, can you, and I think it's in the signature of staff, can you remind us of the ones that show in the Code of Ethics? I'm sure there's alignment there somewhere.
So we actually made an effort to align with council's values when we created the staff code of ethics. And so as indicated, there's the 4 council values, which I've already, and I'm just trying to find the document here that I was quoting. Here we are. So the one, there's an additional one that was added for staff, and that's stewardship. So the transparency, respect, honesty, and creativity are all the values that are espoused by council. The additional one that was added in and through the staff conversations was stewardship, and that was tying to the sort of fiduciary obligations and responsibilities with managing public money and land. And so staff in the consultations we had felt very strongly that that was an ethic that they wanted to see represented as well, the stewardship ethic. But the other 4 values align entirely with council, which is the transparency, respect, honesty, and creativity.
Okay, and then, yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And then just add the other ones that are in the code of conduct, the model code of conduct. Does that sound good as a starting point? Okay, great. And then the things like gifts and the shell of the city of Prince George, those kinds of things that you can just follow that as a template. Is that right, Kendra? Okay. And then I guess the other big piece is enforcement. So how does that work? I mean, my understanding is that it's up to council to enforce council's code of conduct. It's not up to staff or anyone else. We take care of ourselves. So I guess maybe that's the enforcement piece. But if we can't resolve the matter, now when I say we, I'm not talking about we as a group, but if the alleged misdemeanor is not able to be handled by that person and the CAO or myself or however that works, then the process beyond that, do we want to have something like that in there? And what, if we do, then what's that look like? I think that at that point you're getting into a legal matter. And of course, the money all flows one way when we're talking about, legal issues. Frankly, I don't think that, well, no, again, I guess I shouldn't say anything because you never know in future years. And any thoughts on that? Kendra, could you let us know about the A mid-level code of conduct and what it says?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I was just looking at the 5 that were attached. Prince George's or the regional district RDOS don't talk about that further step if council can't resolve it on their own. However, Oliver's talks about the potential to bring in a third-party investigator, and that party would determine if, what would it say? So it says they may conduct a preliminary assessment of the complaint, at the conclusion of which the investigator may determine to continue the investigation or make a written recommendation that the complaint be dismissed or unfounded, beyond jurisdiction or unlikely to succeed. So if you just look at the very page 8 of 9 of Oliver's, it does outline what that third-party investigation could look like. So that could be a potential step for council if you choose.
Okay. Councillor Holmes.
Every situation is different. So I think if you're prescriptive, you don't know what you're prescribing, and it's better for council to deal with these kind of things as they come up. That's my view, and find out what amongst the group, figure out what the best resolution is with the advice of the CAO, of course. So.
I'm personally uncomfortable with that. I think that to have it resolved by the group with the recommendation of the CAO, we had a whole session on code of conduct at LGLA last week, and there was, quite marked difference between the 3 different municipalities that were represented. All of them agreed, though, that if you're going to have a code of conduct, that if you need to have a process. If you're going to enforce one, then, around the table, you need to have a process on what happens if there's no resolution. And I think that by going to a third-party investigator, someone that is outside of the equation, is a way that I would like to see. I don't want it to be put on council to find a resolution. I think that is maybe dangerous and just way too uncomfortable and is not a good use of our time. Councillor Barkwell.
That option always remains. I think that if you go with that prescriptive measure, I think that councils might rush to it a little bit too quickly, and it just results in all sorts of legal expenses, and maybe you're swatting a fly with a sledgehammer. In some cases, I think that it should be it's always open, and I don't know, and I agree with Councillor Holmes, or at least what I think he was sort of insinuating, is that it might take away some of the flexibility that council feels when faced with a situation if you've got that prescribed. The only thing I can say for sure from reading interesting recent court cases is that you have to follow a certain principles of, if there's somebody that on council that the council feels they need to censor, you can't just go do it. You have to tell them what the issue is and give them a chance to answer to that issue, and then make a decision. So that's the only thing that, I don't know if that has to be written in there, or maybe not there, but it's certainly what our corporate officers should have in their portfolio.
So I'm just going to respond to that from the information that I got last week. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's part of process. That is what happens if you follow that process, and there's a certain amount of time that can pass, so that ideally, and we heard this over and over again from the lawyers as well, ideally it's resolved internally, that you never have to go. But if you do have to go outside of that, what does that process look like? But also internally, what does that process look like? How do you resolve the issue internally? How much time do you have for that? You make sure that the communication is crystal clear. All of that is part of process. And I think that we need to have that in our code of conduct, so that it's completely clear and everyone knows what the process is and what the expectations of the code of conduct are. That's just my thought. Graham, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So the challenge with these are always that it is the enforceability. So I think they're best designed as a shield, not a sword, when it comes to these, and it's about codifying existing good behavior. It's not even a tool that's good at solving where there's existing problems. So in light of all that, what some of them have done, and I did read through all the ones that Kendra had pulled and other ones, a lot of them will identify an informal process. So there's a common understanding of that. And that even is as simple as, this person said something that was offensive to me. I'm going to approach them in an appropriate manner in a one-on-one basis to say, when you said that, it made me feel like this, for example. That doesn't work, or they refuse to acknowledge the issue. Maybe they don't want to have a private conversation. Invite somebody to come alongside, trusted advisor for both parties that you both know. And this is the case of spirit of reconciliation with any group, even beyond just council, right? So then maybe that conversation leads to an apology or reconciliation. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's a refusal to even meet, at which case that can instigate more of a formal written complaint. And then the formal written complaint has to be evaluated. And I think further to what Councillor Barkwell was saying, then you're getting into basic principles of natural justice. And people have to know what the complaint is, who their accuser is, and have the right to respond. But again, all that can be more or less done in a pretty informal process. And then maybe the formal process is something that's just vaguely referenced as in certain cases and on a case-by-case basis and evaluation of the facts. It may require the more formal involvement of a third party or whatever the case, without defining exactly what that looks like, but just acknowledging that's always in the toolbox. That's not a code of conduct wouldn't have to reference that for it to be in the toolbox. It's always in the toolbox, but then you're stepping into formal process of conflict resolution that can be quite in depth, and even in those contexts, it can be very challenging for those instruments to be used as a punitive measure unless there's a great detail that's incorporated. Which is the only caution there is then we're into the world of the detailed pieces that council probably had, based on the initial discussion today, was the detailed documents the council is trying to avoid. So it may be that to stay in that concise middle ground, only the informal process would be identified, principles of natural justice reflected, and then just an acknowledgement that formal processes on a case-by-case basis may be pursued.
Thank you. You said it so much better than I did. So yeah, I used the word expectations, but then you used common understanding. Yeah, and then if we're looking at the process, I'm perfectly comfortable with the informal process that you spoke of, knowing that if it can't be resolved, then it has to go beyond that. But ideally, of course, you know, we work through it ourselves and it gets resolved, which has always been the case around this table. So. Anyone else? Councillor Van Elfen.
Just a question through our corporate officer. We're insured as councillors, correct? Liability insurance?
That's through the mayor to Councillor Van Elfen, like indemnified, like if there was someone came after the district, would you be protected? In most circumstances, yes, unless it's a conflict of interest. I think I'd have to look into that.
So if I'm accused of a conflict of interest, the district, it gets to a point where the district hires a lawyer and I hire a lawyer and I win, the district pays my legal fees because I have insurance?
So the community
Just
charter
curious.
story is pretty prescriptive on conflict of interest. Let me just pull it up quickly. So, sorry, I'm just gonna. Look it up. So for conflict of interest, maybe that's not the best. I'm just trying to think of the easiest way to put this into words. Just give me 1 minute. I have to.
Okay, while Kendra's looking that up, are there any thoughts or comments on what Graham just described to us, having an informal resolution, and that would, you know, we would know what the process is for that informal resolution, and then if that didn't work, then we would know that there is a more formal process to be followed without actually prescribing it in our code of conduct. Does that sound, have I captured what you said? Okay. So Councillor Carlson and Councillor Van Elfen have nodded. Others? Councillor Holmes?
Well, I'd certainly be interested in seeing some sort of drafting in Word.
Oh, absolutely. That's the intention. Yeah. Kendra just needs to have some idea of where to start from. That's what she's asking for today. Councillor Barkwell or Councillor Patton, you're good with
Yep. In speaking with CO Stats, what he was discussing, actually Nanaimo in their sentence 5 under their leadership and collaboration is quite open-ended, and actually to me kind of defines exactly what you were speaking of. It doesn't spit it out entirely, but it still leads towards what the objective is.
Can you say again what it is that you're pointing to in the Nanaimo Code of Conduct? I see a number of number 5s.
Oh, yeah, so under leadership and collaboration, it says elected officials will recognize, respect, and value the distinct roles and responsibilities others play in providing good governance, and commit to fostering a positive working relationship with and among other elected officials, staff, and the public.
Can we move on from here and bring forward a motion so that Kendra's not put on the spot for trying to find what she's looking for? Oh, you did find it. Oh, please go ahead then.
So Councillor Van Alphen, conflict of interest they're always fun. So if it was determined that you were in conflict and you were disqualified, what would happen was that if you were, the court declares, so section 113 of the community charter, if the court declares that a person challenged is not qualified to hold office, the municipality must promptly pay the elector's costs, because it's the electors who would bring forward a disqualification within the meaning of the Supreme Court civil rules. And then the court may order that the cost be paid under subsection 1, or the cost that a cost are to be paid may be recovered by the municipality from the person who was declared disqualified. So the courts may decide that the municipality could then recover the cost that they paid, but the municipality would be required to pay the elector's cost to bring that disqualification forward through the courts.
Okay. So Kendra, do you have anything there that fills in the blanks for us, or would you like us to do that?
I kind of kept track of a few. So the beginning of my motion would be that staff be directed to draft a council code of conduct, and further that the council code of conduct be drafted with the following elements. So the model code of conduct key principles, the council strategic plan, the 2015 to 2019 corporate values, and an informal process of complaints. It would just be if council wanted any of the additional provisions, such as the ones that are identified in the Prince George Code of Conduct, if they wanted to include any of those.
Council, do we want to include any of those? Well, I guess it doesn't hurt. This is a draft. It's not the be all and end all. And then if we decide later that no, we don't want that in there, or we want something else in there, or something added that isn't in there, then that's, we can go on from there.
Thank you, Your Worship. That works for us, and certainly it is a draft. And normally, what we do in a circumstance like this is bring a draft or two to council and say, "What do you think?" The reason why we didn't do that in this case is because the guide that we're following from LGMA is very clear that staff shouldn't presume that they understand what values and provisions council may or may not wish to be committed to in the code of conduct, and that we start the conversation with testing all of those things, which is why we really appreciate the guidance the council's providing today so that we can bring back a draft.
Okay. So the three things that Kendra spoke of and the optional clauses, I guess, that are in the Prince George, and then we'll have we'll have a draft to review at a later time. Okay, does someone want to make that motion? Councillor Van Elfen, seconded by Councillor Holmes. And any further discussion, or if you have clarification on the motion? Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. All right. Where are we here? Had our break. On to, this is the Kendra Kinsley show today. Bylaws for adoption. We've been through these already, of course, but for adoption today, the municipal ticketing information amendment, the correction that was made by administration, and bylaw number 2022-018. So does anyone have any questions about that, or are you looking for a refresher, or are we good to just adopt that? Councillor Van Elfen?
Madam Mayor, if that's appropriate.
For adoption?
Yep.
Seconder? Councillor Holmes, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And then the sign bylaw amendment for campaign signs. This was brought forward by Councillor Holmes. Bylaw number 2022-019, also for adoption. Councillor Holmes, Councillor Carlson, all in favor? Great. Anybody wanting to talk to us, Kendra? All right. And now a resolution to go into close. Councillor Van Elfen? Councillor Holmes, thank you.